I want to welcome everybody to the first podcast. This is hopefully in a line of many podcasts that we get to interview different musicians and praise and worship leaders, starting here in Houston, Texas, and then hopefully expanding further. My first guest today is Andy Ramos. He is a praise and worship leader, a musician at Dwelling Place Church. And if you can't tell by looking at us, he's my brother. And that's probably one of the first things that how I chose him is because I'm comfortable talking to him, of course. And he's helped me throughout this process of getting this started. So thanks for joining me, Andy.
Thank you.
You've already seen the kind of the first wave of an outline of what we're trying to do and the questions that we're trying to ask different musicians and whatnot. But how did I start playing at church? Well, how did I start, getting put to play the drums?
I remember at the house, we would try to get you to do different things. Since back then when we started, like I was playing sax and guitar and Miguel, our other brother, was playing bass and trumpet. We would just kind of either put you in the room or put you in the garage and get you to do different things and try to play the instruments, try to do different things. And at church, I was playing piano and he was playing bass. So we just thought logically you needed to learn how to play drums so you could be the drummer in the future. And I think Miguel actually did most of the work because when you started really learning the stuff, I was already married and out of the house. And so I think Miguel's the one that kind of pushed you a little more. And then, of course, you were in band. And so you're playing drums in band. It was just kind of a natural progression to start learning the drum set.
Yeah, I mean, I have a vague, memory of how it all started. Back at our old church, our dad was a pastor at a small church in South Houston, and that's what Andy's referring to. That where he was playing the piano, my other brother was playing the bass, and how I kind of remember it is that there was a natural void there where hey, I could play the drums and join, and then I think one of the drummers at the church may have left or something, and of course there was other drummers there, but it was just, I guess, a natural fit for me to get in there. So I really didn't remember how it all started. So thanks for sharing that. But speaking of that, I mean, how did kind of your backstory of how did you start playing at the church?
I started playing sax and trying to learn how to play by ear. Wasn't very good at it. And then when our dad took over the church, he was kind of the assistant pastor. When he became pastor, the person he replaced retired, and that pastor's wife was the piano player. So they kind of both retired at the same time. And so Dad asked me if I would start learning how to play piano. And he would just kind of take me up to the church when he went to work, drop me off, or on Sundays I would stay. And just since we didn't have a piano at the house, and I just got some books and started teaching myself because I couldn't find anybody to give me lessons. And just started working, just practicing at the church, playing the piano, and kind of got thrown in. And luckily there was some grace and some patience, and we were able to pull it off somehow, little by little, and just every service, every week, just learning more and trying to ask questions and trying to watch other people. And back then there wasn't YouTube or anything like that, so it was just, I knew how to read music, so it was just buying books. I remember buying a Michael W. Smith book and then just learning how to play every Michael W. Smith song I could play. So, at first, a lot of the stuff started sounding like Michael W. Smith because that's all I knew how to play. But that's kind of the start of it.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, I'm 10 years younger, and, so I don't recall a lot of that. just because I was too young, or it's just been a long time ago. So it's kind of good, hearing that from how it started. So that's a good little tidbit that I don't think I've really fully that I fully knew. So that's cool. Um, Moving into that, because you know were participating in praise and worship, and grew in the church that way. What does it mean to you to be part of praise and worship in a church service?
Well, it's a huge responsibility, which back then I didn't really understand. Back then it was just me playing the piano, having fun. I didn't really understand it all. Even some of the songs that we picked, and the way we did some things, I'm sure got dad in trouble, because we'd want to have fun. And we try to do things that, we thought were fun or cool, instead of really understanding the responsibility of leading people into the presence of God and leading people into, that intimate time of praise and worship. We were just, when we started, was just, hey, we're going to play, we're going to jam, we're going to have fun. And as I grew into it, I started to learn and develop and realize what we were doing and what should be done, and what this means, to actually praise and worship, and what it means to lead people. It's more than just playing an instrument. It's more than just, singing some songs. There's a deeper thing in there. It's a relationship with God and intimacy that it's a lot easier sometimes to sing a song and learn things than to hear it. We sing a lot of things that we sometimes don't understand at first, but the more we sing it, we kind of understand it, and it's easier to receive sometimes than when you hear it in a message. So it's a universal language that people just begin to understand, and there's feelings when you hear music. It's happy, sad. You tie it to different events or different emotions, and so it affects people differently. And when you start to learn that, it really changes how you do music and how you do praise worship.
Yeah, no, I totally see that. When you started, because you mentioned that we only had that piano at church,
Yeah.
and so you had to practice there. What was your first keyboard? Or I'm saying keyboard because I think it was a keyboard because we didn't have a piano at the house. But what was the first purchase that you made? What was the first keyboard?
Well, at first I had this little Casio. It was really, really, really small. It's something like if you ever see like Jimmy Fallon do some of his little kid instrument songs, it was one of those that you could barely put your fingers on. And then I ended up saving up some money and borrowing some money to buy a Yamaha DX7. And that was probably my first keyboard that I got. And actually, I still owed some money on it. And when I got married, Miguel actually paid off the loan, so I didn't have to keep paying for that. That was his wedding present to me.
Gift. Nice. I think, I do remember that Yamaha. I think the first kind of one thing that sticks out in my mind is you were telling me that, hey, I'm getting a new keyboard. I'm getting a new keyboard. This was after the Yamaha. You're like so excited, and I was like, oh, okay, sweet. And when it came in, I'm like, hey, where's your keyboard? And you're like, it's right here. It was that Alesis. I think it was I forgot what it was. It was just like the add-on, type thing.
Uh-huh.
You're like, oh, this is a keyboard. I was like, I was expecting like a whole, a big actual keyboard, with keys.
It was a rack mount module. I think that was the Proteus.
Proteus, yeah.
Yeah, that had all the sounds, and you hooked up the sounds into the keyboard to get more sounds.
So, when do you think that first Yamaha was bought? That was, you said right around close to your wedding, and that was 1990-ish?
Yeah, so 88, 89. And so, that was the famous keyboard that, everybody was using back then. the Chicago, Michael W. Smith. I think Michael Jackson had one, but just synth sounds. And the Proteus was more like actual acoustic, piano, that kind of sound.
Right, right.
So it was a mixture of the two.
And I mean, I'm guessing, I'm pretty sure that there's a keyboard in front of you. What are you using now?
Right now, I have it's an Akai MPK 88, which is what's called a controller. It has no sounds, but it feels like a piano. So right now, all my sounds are actually on my laptop. So anywhere I go, I have my sounds. When we used to travel, you go to a church or wherever, a venue, and you were stuck with whatever piano they had and whatever sounds that they had. And now, everything's on the laptop. So I'm using the Spectrasonic stuff, Omnisphere, Keyscape. So all my sounds are in my laptop, and I just hooked up my laptop to the controller, so that the controller is just the bed, just the actual piano keys, but all the sounds are coming out of the laptop.
For those who don't know, I mean, what is your 9 to 5 job?
I work at a middle school. I'm a music teacher and teaching 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. I teach a choir, ukulele, and a couple of piano classes.
Going back to, how practicing, how you said that you used to have to be at church. Now you have that piano at home. What, you've been playing for, many, many, many years. And of course, you have to practice, you have to keep that, keep going. But what is your practice regimen right now?
And not enough. I need to be doing more.
I think every musician might say that.
Well, especially, I mean, you would think I'd have more time right now since we're going through this little pandemic. But school is keeping me super, super busy. But I still try. I try to play scales. I try to go through my chords. I go through songs. For church, we're still trying to produce a weekly song that we upload onto YouTube and Facebook. And so going through those songs and, just keeping my fingers moving, keeping them going. But usually I try to go through some scales. I go through, like I said, my chords and just practice songs. I used to try to go through a little more reading, which I need to do more. I'm losing my reading chops because I don't read as much. Most of the stuff I'm playing is by ear or just chord charts. But I'm trying to still every once in a while pull out one of my classical books and work on some classical songs just to keep my reading and my fingers moving.
Speaking of, the church, dwelling place where you go to church, what is y'all's current practice regimen? Is it on a normal, not during this pandemic time, but during a normal, say week or month, what's y'all's practice regimen?
Right now, well, we have a pretty strong team now. We have 3 to 4 different teams, so I don't have to play every Sunday. But what usually happens is if you're scheduled on a Sunday, we practice the Tuesday before for about an hour, hour and a half. And then we'll practice Sunday morning before the service, which is more of a sound check. And usually on the practice, we'll do a quick run on the songs, talk about any key changes or transitions, how we're going to go from one song to the other song, or any ideas we might have to change it up and freshen up a song. Take a little break, and then we kind of run through the songs again and spend some time, together, worshiping, praying, getting to know each other, because, that really helps build the team, helps build that unity when it does come on Sunday, that we can still worship and not being, worried about the words or worried about the melodies or the chords. We come in prepared. That way on Sunday, we can worship, right along with the congregation.
If someone wants to start, they want to be a musician at church, is it something that they need to previously have, some, knowledge of? Is it something that someone that doesn't have any knowledge or, technical know-how can get into? Or is it, how would you help someone that says, hey, I want to participate in praise and worship?
We have a couple of different things. We have a couple that Randall and Esteban that kind of take care of kind of auditions, even though it's not a big hard audition. It's more just trying to see where they are, what they know. So those are for the people that kind of already play an instrument. So they go through a little process, kind of like a little interview, and they go at our church. We have stuff, like for new members, so they got to go through those classes. So it takes a few weeks, depending on how they're doing the classes, maybe even a couple months to go through the process. And once we get to know them and they know the stuff that we're doing, we can kind of start integrating them into some of the things we do. We have what's called dwell services, which is basically just like a prayer and worship time. And so there might be, 50 people, a couple hundred people there, or it could be 2 or 3 people there. And so that's kind of where we like to start people, because that's our heart, is to worship, and that, our services in our church revolves around those dwell times. So it's an easy place to put people where it's not a lot of pressure. You don't have a big congregation and the live stream going and pastor preaching. It's just, some intimate time. When it comes to our youth, we have a lot of training for the youth. Also, Randall and Esteban do a lot of that, plus our worship pastor for the youth do a lot of training for them, and we try to get them different resources, videos, different things. We haven't had too many adults lately that have started from scratch. So that's probably something we need to develop a little more to help them out. And one of the things that we're learning a lot is, especially now, is technology. So we're trying to make more videos, trying to make more things available for those, those people that want to learn and the people that want to do more with us.
How would you advise someone on how to, maybe start from the very beginning? Maybe they haven't even touched the piano,
Right.
but they want to learn. What would your advice be on how to start that?
The beautiful thing right now is YouTube. You can find anything on YouTube. There are so many different lessons on YouTube, from beginners to advanced, any different style, any different genre. And so I usually tell them, the same thing: learn the notes, learn the keys, learn inversions, which are different ways to play the same chord. There's different ways you can play each chord to make it a little easier and smoother when you're playing. And then after that, I usually just, if I'm showing them, I start with some slow worship songs that only have 2 or 3 chords, and start from the basics. And then I just kind of start directing them to different books or to different YouTube videos and websites that can help them learn, on their own. I'm usually tied up a lot with school and church, so I don't feel like I can consistently teach everybody. But I have no problem helping them get started and then finding them resources. I have plenty of books and plenty of videos to recommend or let them borrow.
Quick side note on that, on starting from scratch and going. I don't mean to shift it to me, but just because I don't remember, Miguel, did teach me a lot, but it was, literally me sitting on his lap and him holding my hands and showing me how to play. How did he learn how to play? Do you remember that?
Miguel's a freak of nature. He learns super fast. His mind works differently. I remember when I was going to go off to Bible college, and Dad told him he was going to have to play the piano while I was gone. So he was going to have to switch from bass to piano, and he actually drew out a piano on paper, since we didn't have one at the house, and would practice on that piece of paper. And I remember one time, I had showed him a song, and he went to take a shower and got out of the shower and said, "Hey, is this how you play it?" And showed me on the piece of paper how to play this thing, and did it perfect.
Wow.
And he just has the ears, to hear it. I had to really, really work hard at it. I think a lot of people look at us and say, since I do it the most, maybe I have more musical talent. And I say, of the 3 of us, I'm probably the worst. Talent wise, I think you two, it just comes naturally to you two. And Miguel just has really, really good ears, that he can just hear it in his head and kind of envision it and do it. And he learns super fast. And so I think both of you have that where it's just really, really natural to you. Where I really, really have to practice and work at it and do it over and over and over. And, it's just one of those things that I love doing. So I think I just, I was passionate about it. And some people have natural abilities and some of us just have to work at it a lot.
We're going to take a quick break, and I want to hit back on practicing a little bit and what I remembered of how I used to practice, but we'll talk about that in just a second. So back from the break, one of the because you kind of sparked a memory of practicing and being in your truck, you and Yolanda were driving to church, and we have a cassette player, like the boombox on the dash, and we're listening to a song that we have to play at the church service, like in an hour or something like that. I for some reason, I just it always kind of sticks in my brain sometimes, where it just happened to be like, I didn't have a drum set at the house. So yeah, if I had to learn a song, it was kind of air drum type practicing, but I could hear it, when I was moving, and I could hear myself make mistakes. That was the weird thing about it. Of course, teachers, they don't only work at the school. There's a lot of things that go on, at home. You did mention that, you don't have to play every service, but, there was a time where you were playing every single service. How do you balance that?
I have to say that, first of all, my wife is super, super supportive, super patient. Before I started teaching, I was actually full-time a worship leader at a church, and that was my job. And I remember having to push, trying to push people for practice and all that. And, my wife Yolanda coming in, and she was tired because she was teaching, and it's like, I don't feel like going to practice today, or, I'm tired. Can we do something else? And I didn't understand, I was like, this is what we're supposed to be doing. And it didn't click to me that, okay, my job during the day was pretty simple. Even though I was working at a church and having to, talk to people or pray for people and all that, it was pretty simple compared to teaching or, other people that are, whether they're doing construction or, work in retail. And so she really taught me how to, hey, you need to think about other people. You need to think about, how their days are going and, the stress that's on their lives. And so it really taught me to put things in perspective. And so I use, I try to tell people, just like your story about the truck is listen to the music in your car, as you're going to work or on the way back. So you're at least familiar with the songs. And that's the time that you're in your car. So you're not taken away from your family or any of your other responsibilities. Sometimes I'll take my lunch break and listen to the songs or go through the songs when I have a chance, and try to do as much as I can, in the little spots, using my time effectively. When I get home, I try as best as I can to be at home and not do as much, whether it's schoolwork or wherever else it is. Try to put a little bit of separation. And then, our responsibility at church, like I said, practice Tuesday nights. We do a Spanish service on Wednesdays, but we do it together. And so I think that's what helps a lot too, is since we're doing it together, we're both involved. So it's not like me being gone another night or she's gone another night. So, the more things you can do together as a family, I think that helps with the time. And then both believing the same thing. We're we're both Christians, we're both believers. And so we know what, our callings are on our lives and our ministry and what we're doing. So that helps a lot. I think if we were completely different on how we believed and how we did things, that would be a lot harder. But I really try to use, maximize my time, whether it's in the car, whether it's, I'm a night person. So once she goes to bed, I'll get out, my headphones or whatever and study my music, or, go to my room and play the piano with my headphones on. So it's quiet. So I just try to find those spots, when she goes grocery shopping, whatever. So I'm not taking away from our time together. I'm just using that time. And then we try to worship, on our, together also during the week. And so those times together kind of helps. Again, I know we're just worshiping and we're doing stuff, but it is, her singing and me playing the piano. So even though we're not sitting down to technically practice, we are doing musical things, which in turn, help out on all the other things that we do musically.
Yeah, and I apologize to the audience. I forgot to mention that Yolanda is Andy's wife, my sister-in-law, but she's also a singer in the praise and worship team. And we've mentioned our other brother Miguel. He's the middle brother, bass player, and his wife Veronica. When actually at one time we were all on the praise and worship team, kind of up there doing our thing. So speaking of being with a praise and worship team, yeah, when we were all up there, it was we of course we knew each other, and we knew how to play off of each other, or what people were what I knew what you were thinking and what Miguel was thinking, without actually having to say it, because we had that time all those years together. But there's going to be a conflict come up. How would you recommend praise and worship teams find a resolution to different conflicts that come up on a team?
Right. Musically is easy. The more you spend time together and, during that practice time, that's why I said it's good that even though you're going through the songs, that you spend some time worshiping together, because you get to start learning people's hearts and learning each other. We like to go out, every once in a while, whether it's to go out to eat, whether it's to watch a movie, whether it's just to goof off somewhere, and you get to know each other. And as you get to know each other, you can be a little more comfortable with each other. What buttons not to push. You start learning how people think and how they react. And so it makes it a lot easier. And, as with just any kind of relationship, is communication, learning how to communicate, learning, what to say and what not to say. Just like any relationship, you need to learn, how to talk. I always use the example of, the story of, your wife or whoever coming in saying this, does this dress make me look fat? There's a right way to answer and there's a wrong way to answer. And the same thing in church. When conflict comes, there's a right way to respond and there's a wrong way to respond. And we, wisdom and just, the Bible says to love one another. And so, we're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to do things wrong. People are going to show up late. People are going to show up unprepared. But we're still supposed to love people. That doesn't mean we excuse everything that they do. But there's a way to say, hey man, we need you to do this, or, can you, step it up in this area, and, how can I help you improve, or how can I help you learn that song, or, am I giving you the resources that you need, and, going through those things. And the more you do life together, the easier it is, and you learn to communicate. And, every time someone gets added to the team, you have to learn. You have to learn, the way they respond to things, and they need to learn you, and how you say things, One of the first things I usually tell people is I'm part Puerto Rican, and sometimes I sound like I'm mad, but I'm really not. That's just the way I talk. And most people that know me know when I'm serious and when I'm not. And so just building those relationships and getting to know each other is probably the biggest thing and the key to a lot of it.
Yeah. No, yeah, definitely. I mean, me personally, I can't even recall a time that I remember seeing you upset, like mad. I mean, I know that you've been frustrated, because, someone didn't show up, or, you know, the drummer got off beat or something, but, I don't even think I can recall a specific time that I've seen you, upset at something. So, but, and, moving on to the actual service, how important is the connection between the praise and worship team and the pastor and church leadership?
We all have to be in one accord, doing the same thing with the same vision and the same goals, and it just makes everything easy. Everything just flows. So you go from one thing to the next thing, and it just there's just this flow that happens musically, lyrically, between the band and the congregation, and between all of us and the pastor. It's just this incredible thing that happens when we can walk together, in unity, united. It's just a really cool flow. But it's working together. The book of Philippians says that you shouldn't. You're all together. You think of each other as no one's more important than the other person, but you're trying to help each other fulfill their dreams, fulfill their purpose. I think as a worship team, as we try to push the pastor or whoever's preaching their vision for the service and their vision for the church, then our needs are met, and our visions and our dreams are met at the same time. Sometimes it doesn't feel like that or look like that how can I help someone else create their vision and push their vision? How is that helping mine? But there's something special that happens, especially with the working with a church, and the way the Holy Spirit flows, and the way things move in a service, that when you prefer one another, just these incredible things happen, and you're really united, and begin to really grow together.
Piggybacking on that, I mean, what would you say is your kind of biggest influence, both on the spiritual side, but also on musical side, if there's a difference?
Influence, of course, I think starting off, probably Dad was one of my biggest influences, just to see how he pastored, to see how people reacted to him, good and bad, and how he reacted back to them, taught me a lot. And then there was a guy named Heriberto Hermosillo. He was with a group called Torre Fuerte. That when I was first starting to tour a lot, we did a lot of touring with them, and he was a keyboard player for that group. And before he became a Christian, he was a musical director for Luis Miguel, which is pretty famous singer in Mexico. And he would just sit down with me, every concert, lunch, dinner, and he would just talk to me, share with me. There are times we would finish, I remember finishing some stuff. We were in San Antonio, and he was living in McAllen and had to drive to McAllen. He's like, hey, I want you to just ride with me in the car, and we're going to drive to McAllen, and then I'll fly you home. And so, we spent from San Antonio to McAllen, whatever that was, 6-7 hours, just talking. And then he flew me home. So we drove straight to the airport, and he flew me home. But those conversations with him really helped me deal with a lot of stuff, musically and even spiritually. A lot of the stuff that, maybe I didn't understand, being, a musician, people try to take advantage of you, different things, and the different pressures of being there, and equipment not working, and sound systems not showing up, and just the pressure of all that. He really, really encouraged me a lot, and his words just really, really influenced me. And then musically, I mean, he was an incredible musician. So musically, a lot of the stuff that I play, a lot of my little moves that people know um, that I play are all Heriberto, or the majority of them.
Kind of, sidetracked on that. You've seen, you've been through a lot. Is there something that you still remember? Someone asks, what's kind of like the worst thing that's happened, in a service, or during a service, or just something that came up at church, that deals with praise and worship, either in service or out of service. But is there something that sticks out to you that I mean, it won't get out of your brain, even to this day?
It's we did a tour with Tour de Fuerte where we did it was in Texas, so it was like Dallas, Austin, San Antonio, um, and they hired this sound company that was just horrible. They weren't very professional, and they weren't Christians. So the last two concerts were Dallas and Houston. So in Dallas, the guys went out, and from the sound guys, not the bands and all that. So that company, they went out and they got drunk, and then I remember I don't remember if they wrecked the truck or did something to the truck. Um, so the sound equipment did not make it to Houston. We had to find a whole other thing to do the concert in Houston, and then they sent us another sound guy since the other guys were stuck in Dallas, and he had like a seizure and was having some kind of I don't know if it was withdrawals or seizures, where he ended up being under the sound system, going through like withdrawals or whatever, and then myself and one of the guys from one of the other bands had to run up there and run sound and try to help him while we're doing this concert. And it's I just remember those couple of tours that tour that was just with that company that was just crazy.
Yeah, yeah. I think I vaguely remember that. I think I remember someone smoking. One of the sound people, like, smoking inside the church or something. I forgot what it was.
Yeah,
Uh,
sign door.
I thought you might recall or talk about would be, there was one time where someone suggested speakers on the ceiling. I kind of always remember that
Yeah.
that idea floating around from, someone that thought that, the speakers from the ceiling would kind
Yeah.
of rain down the sound of God onto the congregation.
My other thing is at Dad's church, when people would just, there was times where people could just go up and sing whatever song they wanted with
Yeah,
no practice or
yeah,
whatever. And so
yeah.
that's learning by fire, with them
Right.
singing songs that we had no idea. And that's probably where we got in the most trouble, because we would get, we throw in some Striper or some different song just to, we didn't know what we
Yeah.
were doing. So,
And I mean, plus they wouldn't keep a beat or keep a key, or
no.
and it was just, you're kind of just in it. I do remember. Okay, now you sparked another memory where, it was, at the old church where, we didn't have a lot. I mean, it was a small church. I mean, we're, of course, everything was taken care of, but we, in the middle of service, or someone forgot or whatever, we'd lose a drumstick and we had to use a coat hanger, when they used to have the cardboard kind of tube on a wire
Wow.
hanger, and we had to use that for drumsticks a couple times.
Yeah.
But the other one that I remember was traveling on a tour. I mean, it was a show that, we're going to play at an event for a, convention or something, and the van that we were in would like suddenly lose power,
Yeah.
and the lights would go off, everything would go off, and it's kind of kind of crazy. That was one of the things I still remember, that it was
We took that van all the way to Chicago.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So the last question that we have is, what songs are you listening to that, either get you into a spiritual mood, or a, dance, kind of praise and worship mood? What's your go-to song right now?
When it comes to just getting ready for our worship services, our dwell service is a guy named Abraham Osorios. He has these instrumental music that somehow anytime I play him, it just kind of puts me in that right frame of mind. I also like to use them when I go to pray. It just kind of gets me into that atmosphere. And then for getting more in the mood to play is a guy named Eli Soares. I think he's from Brazil. And it's kind of a combination of jazz and funk stuff. A lot of the stuff reminds me a lot of the band I mentioned, Torre Fuerte. It just has this groove that every guy on there is just an incredible musician. And it just gets me going.
And so where can people find you online?
I have my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Andy Ramos. I believe on all the other platforms, I'm also just Andy Ramos on Instagram and Facebook.
Well, I mean, I want to thank you for, helping me through this process, being my first guest, and, really pushing me, to be a better musician and, being an awesome brother. So I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, and I wish you the best of luck. You can do this, man.
All right. Thanks, man.